discussed a few things already in the pathology, which is our cellular adaptation, reversible cell death, irreversible cell death, and now we know if the stress continues, the cell will undergo what? Cell death. So today we are going to study about the cell death. Commonly we study 5 different kinds of cell death. You might have known by now, which is necrosis. Second one is apoptosis. Third one is necroptosis. Fourth one is pyroptosis. Fifth one is ferroptosis. Well, these three are very small topics, while we have to study this much in very detail. Okay, so today's topic is necrosis. What is necrosis? Necrosis is a form of cell death with the signs of inflammation. Now, why am I saying with the signs of inflammation? Because when we will study apoptosis, in the apoptosis, the signs of inflammation is absent. Why? Because when there is a death of a tissue, it releases this death associated molecular patterns, DAMPs. But this is not released, it is not released in apoptosis or the apoptosis. What does it do? It attracts all the inflammatory cells. So if DAMPs is released, it will attract inflammatory cells, there will be inflammation. But if DAMPs is not released, there will be no inflammatory cells and there will be no inflammation, as we will see in the apoptosis. That is why I called it necrosis is a form of cell death with the signs of inflammation. Now before we begin, always remember this about the histology and pathology. Color of protein, color of nucleic acid, color of mucus, color of fats. What is the color of protein? Pink. What is the color of nucleic acid? Purple. What is the color of mucus and fats? Transparent. They are transparent, thus we use special stains for it. Okay, now let's begin. In the necrosis, which is a form of cell death, we study few types of necrosis like coagulative necrosis, liquefactive necrosis, fibrinoid necrosis, caseating necrosis, and so on. So we will study them one by one. The first kind of necrosis is known as coagulative necrosis. What does it mean? Coagulative means coagulation. Now tell me one thing. Suppose this is egg. You boil the egg. A boiled egg become what? Coagulated. Why? Because of the denaturation of protein. Similarly, if you would have remembered, calcium was coming inside, right? Calcium was activating various enzymes, for example, phospholipase, nucleases, protease. What protease does is, it denatures protein, and after denaturation of the protein, it becomes what? Coagulated. So what is the first finding of coagulative necrosis? In the microscopy, you will see coagulation. What is the second thing? Now tell me one thing. If the calcium was coming inside, it activated proteins. Soon we also studied there was denaturation of protein. Now tell me one thing. Isn't protease, which is an enzyme, also a protein? All enzymes are protein, right? Except ribozymes. So if we are saying proteins will undergo denaturation, what will happen? Protease will undergo also denaturation. It means after some times all the enzymes will also get inactivated. So it means proteins will be denatured and they won't be digested. Again, calcium came, activated protease, they started digesting. But soon the protease was denatured also. So protein digestion will take place completely? No, it won't get completely digested, but it will be only denatured. So denatured protein will be present and it appears in the stage of coagulation. Now another thing, Cell has cytoskeleton. Now, cytoskeleton are also made up of proteins. So if the proteins is not destroyed, what will happen? The cytoskeleton will remain. So if you see a cell in coagulative necrosis, you will see cytoskeleton frameworks preserved. Got it? So we will see two things. Now this is a form of cell death. So no nuclei will be visible because we saw pycnosis, karyodesis and karyolysis. Karyolysis will be seen here with no nuclei or no chromatin will be present here. So if we take the microscopic image, don't you think it will resemble somewhat like this? The left side is normal, while on the right side the tissue has undergone coagulative necrosis. How can you say? Because in the right side you don't see these nuclei. See, here you have nuclei, nuclei, nuclei. But onto the right side, do you see any nuclei in the cells? No. Do you see nuclei? No. What do you see only? You see the nuclei outside these cells. Got it? This is, by the way, the biopsy of kidney. So you see here, these are what? These are blood vessels. Inside the blood vessels, you see the RBC. And inside you also see inflammatory cells, for example, neutrophils and so on. But inside the tubules, for example, all these tubules, do you see any nuclei? The answer is no. Why? Because the cells of the tubules has undergone necrosis. And what is the signs of necrosis? Inflammatory cells, it will be present. Signs of coagulative necrosis, inflammatory cells will be present. Cellular cytoskeleton or cellular framework present. See, the cells have died, but still, do you see the similarity? They appear in this tubular state. They also appear in this tubular state. It means the cellular framework is still present. I told you protein appears pink, so they have undergone denaturation, but they are not digested. So this will appear pink with no nuclei. So a few things about coagulative necrosis. This is the most common form of cell death. What is this mechanism? The mechanism of denaturation of the protein. And where does it happen? It happens mostly in solid organs. Got it? Most common form of necrosis mechanism is denaturation of protein, seen mostly in solid organs, and in the solid organs mostly seen in kidney, as we saw, and heart. You must have known this MI or the myocardial infarction. What is necrosis? Infarcted tissue which has undergone discoloration, right? This is also infarction. This is myocardial infarction. Now let's say this is kidney. These two blood vessels are not, adequate in supplying the blood to this tissue, this part of the tissue. So in this region, the cells will die, right? Suppose there was ischemia at this place, maybe a atheromatous plaque or something, and these two blood vessels which are supplying this region are not able to supply the proper adequate amount of the blood. So this part will die, and this will give wedge shape appearance. Let me show you. On the either side, you see two blood vessels. They were not able to provide enough oxygen and the nutrients. So the reason of the kidney in this part died. Got it? So this was our coagulative necrosis. Now, if you are studying for NEET, PG, INISET or FMG, they might ask you something like ghost cells. Why call them ghost cells? Because they are dead, but still they have the appearance of a cell. That is why they are known as ghost cells or tombstone or the graveyard. Why? Because they appear. See, have you seen a ghost? They are like this, but they don't have eye. They are just, seats of cover. Similarly, you see, there are seats of cover with no eyes. That is why we call it ghost cells or tombstone appearance. So coagulative necrosis is done. One more thing, it doesn't happen in the brain. Even though our brain is a solid organ, but this is mostly what coagulative necrosis is a mechanism is denaturation of protein. And brain is what? Brain is rich in fat. So if there is no protein inside the brain, how there can be coagulative necrosis? Coagulative necrosis requires what? It requires protein. Brain doesn't have it so much. It's mostly rich in fats. So the next topic is our liquefactive necrosis. Also known as coagulative necrosis. Liquid, always remember, coagulative. See, in the liquefactive necrosis, you will see most common organs are brain and pancreas. And why is it? Because they have very high enzymatic levels. For example, in the acute pancreatitis, what happens is pancreas starts releasing all the digestive enzymes inside itself. Pancreas has large category of digestive enzymes. So if that organ is releasing digestive enzymes inside itself, what will happen? The pancreas will start digesting itself, and upon the digestion, it will form a liquid mess, right? So most common organ is brain and pancreas. Why? Because they are very high enzymatic level. Those enzymes will digest the fat. Digested fat appears as what? Liquid. You must have seen butter melting. It's liquid, right? And this liquid, we will see what happens. See, since they are, dying fat cells, it will also release DAMPs, death associated molecular pattern. It will attract what? Inflammatory cells. Inflammatory cells will come, try to resolve this liquid, try to remove the liquid. For example, your macrophages, neutrophils. Macrophage is a cell of chronic inflammation, so not macrophage mostly, some number of it. So neutrophils will come, all those cells try to remove this liquid, and they will form the pus. So where it started, brain and pancreas, they are rich in enzymes. They digested fat, liquid was released. At the same time, cell was destroyed, death associated molecular pattern was released, inflammatory cells was invited or attracted. They came to remove this liquid, and this is known as pus. As you study the Robbins, everything is mentioned there. Got it? This is occasionally seen in bacterial and fungal disease. Bacterial and fungal infection. lysosomal enzymes of leukocyte will help in the digestion of tissue. Once the DAMPs is released, and since this is forming what? Liquid, this is known as wet gangrene. Example, acute pancreatitis, and in the brain. So this was the second form of our necrosis. We studied coagulative necrosis. Coagulated means coagulated. Then we studied our liquefacting. Why? Because the fat was turning into liquid. Now we have our caseous necrosis. What does caseous means? Caseous means cheese. So this necrosis will have cheese-like appearance. Oh, sorry, I forgot to, show you the image. See, this is the brain. You see this liquid? This is what I was talking about. This appearance is what gives the name liquefactive necrosis. So, coagulative necrosis, cheese-like appearance. Let me show you the photograph. It might not be so appetizing when you go to have pizza, because does it resemble cheese? Answer is yes. Why? What does cheese mostly have? Fats plus small amount of protein, right? The thing is, your caseous necrosis is a collection of coagulative necrosis. It means what? Denaturation of protein plus liquefactive necrosis. It means the destruction of lipids, similar to what cheese have. This is mostly seen in tuberculosis and some fungi like histoplasmosis, coccidiomycosis. So all the typical stages will take place, but what will happen is, on the top of it, mycobacterium has fats in its cell membrane, right? So you all know mycobacterium tuberculosis or the fungi. They have high lipid content in their cell wall. They will be digested, and the digestion will appear, the digested product will appear cheesy. This is the reason why we call caseous necrosis as cheese-like appearance, because they have cottage cheese appearance. So caseous means cheese-like, necrotic tissue showing the cheese-like appearance. Cellular architecture will be lost here, as you can see in the photograph, often surrounded by the macrophages and the other inflammatory cells. We will see when we will be studying our chronic inflammation, I will show you something known as granuloma. So in the granuloma, what happens is, in the center you will have those inflammatory cells surrounded by the collar of lymphocytes, and here you will have epithelioid cells because they have appearance like epithelium, and you will see these giant cells. That's a topic of your chronic inflammation, so don't worry. But in this photograph you can see these are giant cells. This is the caseating central part. This is the collar of lymphocytes, and these are what? Epithelioid cells. So this is your caseating necrosis, a mixture of coagulative and liquid necrosis, liquefactive necrosis. Example is TB and fungal infections like coccidioidomycosis and histoplasmosis. Now the next one is fat necrosis. Now one thing surprising here is that we have seen, bacteria, fungus, they have been destroying the cells. We also saw because of ischemia it happened. But in the fat necrosis, the cause of necrosis is two. First is enzymatic, and second one is trauma. For example, omentum, and this one for breast. So suppose a lady fell down or some sort of trauma, that will cause what? That will cause the destruction of fats. For example, there was pancreatitis, and the pancreatic, lipases, all that was, all that came outside of the pancreas, inside the peritoneal cavity. Inside the peritoneum, you have omentum, and omentum is rich in fat. So those lipases will act onto the omentum, and again, fat breakdown will take place. Now, once the fat breakdown happens, what is released? Fatty acids and some kind of, alcohol, for example, your glycerol. This fatty acid associates with the calcium ion, because we know during the irreversible cell damage, a large influx of calcium takes place. So this fatty acid associates with the calcium and it forms chalky white precipitate. And a lot of the time this is known as saponification. So in the fatty necrosis, we saw trauma or the enzymatic etiology caused the breakdown of the fat associated with the calcium. It underwent saponification, and as a result of saponification, it produced what? Chalky white precipitate. Example of enzymatic fat necrosis: acute pancreatitis. In this pancreatitis, lipases are released into the environment, acts onto the omentum, and it undergoes fatty destruction. While in case of trauma-induced fat necrosis, continuous trauma results in the necrosis of fatty tissue. Example, someone, let's say someone has some kind of disease and he is taking injection for very long. For example, in the tuberculosis, multiple drug resistant tuberculosis, they are usually prescribed drugs like amikacin, kanamycin, all those injections for so long, like for 6 months. So continuous injection in a specific site can actually, continuous piercing into the fat, which will cause what? The fatty necrosis. Trauma-induced fat necrosis. Continuous injection in the glutes. So this is an example of fat necrosis. Now the last one is our fibrinoid necrosis. Let's break the term. Fibrinoid. Fibrin means what? Fibers. Oid means like. For example, thyroid. Thyroid means butterfly. Oid means like. Uske jaisa. So this necrosis appears like thread. So what happens is, let's say there was a bacteria. Macrophage came, it engulfed the bacteria